We just had a presentation on building a new narrative for our society through consensus and trust. In order to do so, we have to focus on the young adults of our society. Today, I'd like to talk about around 500,000 people who are there in our society but have not received much attention so far, the voices of the isolated youth. Isolation refers to a state in which you have no social interaction with either your family members or anyone else. And some even do not leave their house and even their room and confine themselves to a limited space. They need to support themselves, so they find jobs, usually in places where you don't have to have contact with others, like logistics centers or convenience stores. So they are different from the NEET, who are not in education, employment, or training. Isolated young adults are literally lacking any kind of social capital. Among those aged 19 to 34, the number of isolated youth was 3.1% of the total young adults, about 340,000 in 2019. That was before the pandemic, but with the social distancing during the pandemic, in 2021 it went up to 540,000. And last year, with the post-pandemic, that number dropped slightly to 490,000, but it was not the pre-pandemic level. Still, nearly 500,000 adults are in isolation. So that's a big number. Then why are there so many young adults in isolation? When you become a young adult, you finish your school, get a job, and become financially independent, create new relations, and move out of your parents' house. Academically, it is called the transition to an independent adult life. But recently, there are findings that this transition is being delayed. You graduate from school later, get jobs later, and usually do not get married. And even if you do get married, it happens later than in the past. So all this transition is being delayed and you are seeing fiercer competition. And in the meantime, you might be exposed to family violence and suffer from domestic violence, school violence. And you may fail in college entrance exam or in getting a job. And if there is someone that you can talk to and get help, then it might be better. But sometimes there is no one to rely on. So at some point, you might want to give up on everything and give up on yourself. So you just stay in your room and end up just being isolated. I once blamed the young adults for being very weak as they seemed like not trying anything. But actually, the isolated young adults were lonely and felt like losers and even felt like cockroaches. They wanted to work and hang out with people like everyone else, but couldn't do that. So they just hated themselves. So we wanted to understand the SOS signals sent by isolated young adults. So we did a social experiment of young people who are isolated. So let's watch the video clip together. I failed to get a job for 4 years. So I felt like a loser. I used to take photos and then I did some drawing, but I just put all of them away. And I just wanted to commit suicide when I turned 30. I have some notebooks and my diaries. What I really want is to break this cycle of re-isolation. So we have to decide what to have for our breakfast. Should we put some soy sauce? Yes, rock, scissors, paper. You just saw Jun-hyung in the video, and he is here with us with great courage. So it must not have been easy for him to be here. Please give him a big hand. Hello. I have been living in isolation for 7 years and I'm in my 30s. It really was not easy for me to be standing on this big stage after so many years in isolation, but I thought that I need to have courage. During the financial crisis, actually my family was torn apart and a friend of mine had committed suicide and I had difficult time adapting to college and also failed to get a job. I always had relationship issues. I always had a sense of self-blame and failure, so I couldn't interact with people and ended up getting isolated. I was scared of having social interactions, so I couldn't find jobs. And suddenly, I turned 30 without having a proper career. As I was living on this isolated life, I became very sick. So I started to work out and it helped with my body, but the relationship side was still difficult. So I thought that I need to change my environment. I needed to learn how to interact with people and to be social and have a lot of experiences. That's why I applied to the share house. In the share house, I met many people and talked with them and learned to relax and let my guards down. We had daily meetups and we shared our stories, and that really helped me. Everyone shared the same experience of being isolated, so I didn't feel ashamed of sharing my experience. I really liked the part that we can talk a lot. Interacting with others and learning how to be with others. It was such a great experience, and I got to realize that I liked certain kind of people and there are certain etiquettes that you have to follow. I felt stronger. Even when I move out, after the contract, I will be still in contact with these housemates, and that really gives me a great sense of security. I can talk about anything to these housemates. I can ask anything, and they will not think of me as a weirdo. We can talk about anything and laugh about anything and text each other for no special reasons. I think that was the biggest gift that I have ever had in my life. I'm sure that there must be those of you living alone and locked up in your room. I hope that my story would reach you and help you find your way out. Thank you. Thank you, Jun-hyung, for being so courageous and stepping up to share your story. Here, we have some other housemates of Jun-hyung who are here to support him. And the place they live is a share house on a hill of Gangbuk-gu in Seoul. The house has a master and staff, and a new member joined them in May this year, and many things happened since then. To live together, they had to set some rules, like how often the common bathroom should be cleaned and how much detergent should be used for cleaning. Those things needed to be discussed. Of course, it was not convenient. When two people share one room, they went to bed at different times, so they had to turn off the lights by discussing among each other. those were the things that you didn't have to care when you were alone. For example, if you have lunch together, that's fine. But if somebody orders their dinner to be delivered, and if you don't share it with one person, then that person might feel very upset. That kind of little disappointments can turn into a big fight, but amazing things happened. Other housemates mediated the conflict, and that led to people learning about sorting things out. Those are very natural things, but very unfamiliar things for the housemates. So share house became a home to return to at night. And roommates now, they have become your true friends that you can call and have a drink even after leaving the share house. Of course, there were people who left the share house in the middle because they couldn't sort things out and they couldn't live with people who are not your family members. And they still have conflicts with their housemates. But unlike when they were isolated alone, now they can argue about things that they cannot agree on and face up to the conflict and manage it safely. In that process, they are building up confidence. The young adult who had lived in isolation for 13 years says that now he wants to find a job that can help others. He is not nervous about meeting people like he did in the past. So now he can try new things. Well, what made this experiment a success? First is the space. Once you pack your stuff and move into the share house, you are cut off from your previous history of isolation. You wake up in the morning and prepare breakfast together. That kind of normal life come back. You share your life in a space where you cannot get away from others. Of course, you can argue, but you cannot break people off or cut them out of your life because they are right outside your door. Of course, you can get tired and choose to be on your own for some time, but there is the sense of security that there is someone on the other side of the door waiting for you to come out and talk to them. So now it's time for you to open the door and go outside into the living room. The second success factor is people. At the share house, everyone has an experience of being isolated. At morning gatherings, they can share those negative feelings and talk about why they were isolated and not feel ashamed. In Korean, the word family refers to those who eat together. In isolation, people didn't look after themselves, thinking that they are not worthy of the meal. But now, you cook and eat with your housemates. There are also facilitators who understand the experience of isolation and support you. They understand the experience of isolation that the young adults want to hide and show great support. And there are also scholars and researchers like me. And there are also peer supporters and isolation masters who are there to help isolated young adults. And they are like role models for the isolated young adults. The last success factor is experience. Here at the share house, our young adults embrace the experience of isolation as it is and also make a joke out of it. When someone has a trouble finding a right word, they laugh it off and joke. It's because you have been living on an isolation for such a long time and you don't feel bad about that. You can have an argument, but you don't cut people off. You have a safe relationship and support each other. And try new things one at a time and build small successes. At the share house, your housemates, masters, and staff and experts support you and you build a sense of confidence. Junhyang is now back to drawing webtoons. And some people are working on becoming social worker. They have a home to go back to and are preparing to live independently into the wider world. And they are sending the message to those who are in still isolation to ask for help. from isolated room to the share house for isolated adults, and then into the neighborhood of the share house. The world is getting wider. Finding a way to be yourself and to stand on your feet and to go back to the world and to find solidarity. The experiment doesn't end here. If we expand it from one isolated room to another share house and into the wider neighborhood, these young adults will meet each other. Yet, this community experiment is just limited to this Seongbuk-gu neighborhood. The name of the company that is running this share house is Unscary Company. Unscary Companies, Unscary House. Just like this name, the experiment on making the world not scary for the young adults. For it to succeed and to expand wider into the whole world, what should we do? First of all, the government can create policies to support the isolated young adults. Last December, the government announced a plan to support the young isolated adults. In this summer, 4 of these young future centers were created to help the isolated youth to go back to the society. And it was such a good news. So it would be great to create policies to support the young isolated youth, creating houses for them, to provide support for them through experts and people with similar experiences. But to provide the support, we don't have any legal ground. Young carers, aging out youth, isolated youth, there are various names to call them, but we don't have any system to help them. Beyond the Basic Youth Act, actually to support them properly, we need a Youth Welfare Act. We have to grant legal status to these young people and create stable community space. What about companies? If they understand the potential of these young people and have the understanding of their dignity, why not create some kind of internship for them? Maybe you can also provide jobs for them, and there could be joint projects for them. There could be neighbors, members of the share house. They cook in a communal kitchen run by the local social cooperatives. And the locals who meet the young people at those restaurants can teach the young people how to take care of the groceries. And these neighbors are accepting the youth as they are and not have any prejudice, but send them this signal of courage. There could be family members and friends. And if you know anyone around you who is in isolation, don't criticize them, but just tell them that you are there to help them. If you are ready, then I'll be willing to help you. So please tell me when you are ready and want some help. Lastly, I want to tell the isolated young adults, it is okay. You can have a rest. But don't hate yourself too much. You don't have to blame yourself. Get sufficient rest, and when you want to come out, ask for help. There might not be any legal channels to provide you with help, but there are people who are so willing to help you. Sometimes you can fail and also regret that, but I hope that you don't give up. So there are isolated young adults and their family members and friends and neighbors and companies and the legislature. If we work together, I think that we can create a tight network to support these young adults so that we will not lose any of these young adults. The isolated young adults might seem like their time have stopped. The water is flowing, but it seems like they are going backward, maybe. But when they had their rest and want to go back, we should open up the door and help them by giving them a hand. Thank you.